I make reference to the idea of faith in God, or faith in a prophet, or faith in a scripture, or any of those kinds of faith in something. And I do see that stuff as absolutely valuable. And that's not what I mean by the supreme faith.
Yeah, I got that, what you're saying.
So that's a common way that people will use the word faith, and I think that's, worth acknowledging. But I use the term the faith of God instead of just the faith in God. And there's pretty much two things that I have in mind to just quickly state that I recall from that video, because I don't know what I said exactly. I just know I probably covered these 2 points. And here's a little quick summary. So I'll start with the idea of being open to the future and open to whatever happens. Like, I'm open to the possibilities. I'm not tense about one particular thing happening in a certain way or avoiding a certain outcome. I'm just, in a way, I don't mind what happens, or even more specifically, I don't mind how things happen. I can have my preferences or my commitments, my biases, but I can hold them gently or relaxed, so I don't have to be focused on one particular method, working in one particular time frame. That may be how it goes, but there's another alternative where I can say, I really don't mind how it works, or even when it works. I'm just in the process of learning about whatever my interest is, and I go about it. Or I want to produce whatever outcome I value, and I go about my exploration and my experimenting. So to me, that's connected to faith, because I'm not focusing on a particular ideal or even a particular way, like a method of promoting that ideal. So there's an element of faith, because whatever God's will is, I'm welcoming it. I want to know it. I want to be, participating and active and clear and calm and effective. And that's using the phrase God's will. I don't know if you want me to comment on that at all, but it's just one way of, talking about cause and effect, I guess, ultimately, I would say. So, do you want me to comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, there's this idea of God as there's a few different ideas of God. So one idea of God focuses on God as the creative force, or the creative process. So God creates different species, and God creates different planets, and God creates different emotions. Whatever is created, different people, different, everything that's created is ultimately using God's creative, God's creativity. Let me put it that way. So that's maybe a weird way to talk about it. It is a relatively impersonal or transpersonal, meaning beyond, not even not personal or personal, just not even related to whether it's personal or not. It's just like universal. It's interplanetary or whatever. So God is the creative process. Like we use the term nature, or the term reality or universe. The universe manifests as different galaxies, and then blah, 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 blah. All of that we could call the will of the universe, or the purpose of the universe, or the purpose may seem weird, but the process of the universe, the activity of the universe, the creativity of the universe. Okay, so I'm throwing together a bunch of words there. I want to check in. Did you pretty much get all that, or is there any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
How about yourself?
What?
I'm with you.
You're with me. Okay. So there's. I'll diverge just a moment, or I'll expand this just a moment to say, when did the universe start?
You're actually asking me.
Yeah, I mean, as a rhetorical question, meaning, consider this question, like, when did the universe start? What comes to mind when I ask that question?
I really don't know.
Okay, that's a great answer. It was here before I was here, right? Before I started noticing anything, apparently there was already a universe. That's what other people tell me that seem reliable, because they're like, older than me and all that stuff, right? Everybody says it. So I show up and, people tell me, okay, it's now 1971, and we've been here already. I take their word for it. It's pre-existing, and we could say it's beginningless, or it's eternal, or it has no beginning from a normal sense of the word. When did it begin? Like, it's out of the scale that we're used to talking about time. All we can really say is the beginning of the universe is the beginning, and we can estimate how long it's been since then in different units, but we don't even really know. Somewhere around 7 billion to 50 billion years old, or whatever. And we got a big range as our best estimate. And when I say we, I didn't make that estimate. I just believe it when somebody said it. Okay, fine. I don't have any argument with it. It doesn't really concern me that much. So I'm going to go with the idea that the universe is boundless or eternal or throughout all time. So if I say what created the universe or who created the universe, it's like a weird question, right? Where's the end of the universe? What's the boundary of the universe? What's beyond the universe?
It's bad, but I don't know this answer either.
It's a weird question. Those are all weird questions, yeah. So it's you could even say an illogical question. Because what's beyond the boundary of the universe? Like, well, how would we know? We define the universe as this really inclusive thing. So it's across all time or eternal. It's across, I don't remember what I just said, but it's boundless. It's everywhere. It's omnipresent, or every place has the universe there. You can't go somewhere where it's not the universe, right? And what other element would be what created the universe, or what's the other power that creates things besides the universe creating things? If I ask you, what's the other thing besides the universe, separate from the universe, outside of it, isolated from it, what's the other thing that creates stuff? What is a higher power than the universe? What's more powerful than the universe?
I don't even.
It's like, these are weird questions, right?
Yeah.
How do you even, we've just said there's nothing outside of the universe, so then I start the next question with this weird presumption of, okay, what is outside of the universe that creates things besides the universe? We've already kind of covered that we don't have any logical capacity to contemplate anything outside of the most inclusive thing. So if something is totally inclusive, totally comprehensive, it's all time, it's eternal, it's all space, it's everywhere, it's omnipresent, it's omnipowerful or omnipotent, it's all powerful, it's almighty. So if we take those adjectives and say, well, what do we call those adjectives? We can say the universe. We could also say, what else would fit the description I just gave? What other terms could we use? Anything come to mind?
No.
Okay, well, it's a kind of a classic description of God. I see you processing that because I can see your face on the video there. So what are the elements I mentioned?
Eternal.
Eternal, the qualities. Eternal, what else?
Boundless.
Huh? Oh, boundless. Boundless, yeah. Or unlimited, right?
It's like always there.
Always there. Omnipresent, or no, that's eternal. Whatever. You got it, right? You got the basic idea. Like all of the classic qualities that we, almighty, that's the other one. All of those classic qualities correspond to the word universe. They also are qualities that we've learned to associate with the word God. And in other traditions or other languages, Allah or Brahmin, or I don't know all the words that people have used for divinity, or all the words that people have used for universe in some other language, because I only know basically one language. I know like the word Dios in Spanish is like the word for God. Like I know like a little Latin or whatever, but basically I don't know those languages. So we've got all these different languages, and in some languages we have a few different words that are similar. And if I say God's will, I mean what actually happens. I don't mean God's will as opposed to my will, or as opposed to your will, or as opposed to the devil's will. There's no opposing the Almighty. There's no opposing the all-inclusive. So that's one way of considering God's will, and that might be unusual. The way I just said it to you, I don't know if you've ever heard that before, other than if you heard me say it. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Have you ever heard something like that? So if God's... What?
I can't say I have.
Right. So if God's... And I don't know, I mean, I've been exposed to this idea. I didn't totally come up with it. I definitely know... In fact, a lot of people have said things like I just said, but I didn't know about that for quite a while until I started reading some, unusual books, or talking to some people about unusual subjects. Like, that wasn't something that I was taught when I went to a regular church in my youth. Like, if we were taught that, I don't remember that. It seems like we were taught other things that are somewhat contrary to what I just said, in fact. But one way of looking at things, or one way of using the words God's will, could be God's will manifests through every development. So everything, or every event, every process is God's creativity, or God's will. Because there isn't any other will outside of it. So an analogy is that there's a tree. Like, here's a trunk of a tree, and then here's branches of a tree on my, like I'm showing my hand, or my wrist and my forearm, and then my fingers and stuff. So the branches of the tree, they're already part of my body. You don't reconnect them to my body. They're already part of my body, so they're already expressing the creativity of my body. Whatever, whenever these cells right here in this finger or that finger got formed, they're not outside of my body. The body is the inclusive category in language, is the body. So this is an extension of the body. The body's already in it. The body's already the finger. There's no part of the finger that's outside of the body, right? So a metaphor that is popular in the New Testament tradition of Christianity is, among other traditions that use the same metaphor, is the vine, or the tree that includes all the branches already. So I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, if you ever heard a reference to that before, but I'm curious if you ever heard somebody talk about divinity as like a vine or a tree with many branches.
Maybe a little.
Okay. So in the New Testament, Jesus is the vine, and you, or we, are the branches. That kind of phrase is in the New Testament if you cared to check it out. I think from the Old Testament it says God, or divinity, is like a mansion with many rooms. Like a really big house, with like 20 different rooms. It's a mansion, and all the different rooms inside the mansion are the mansion. And God is like that. It's like got lots of subcategories, or lots of inclusive components within it. So the branches of the tree are already the tree. I don't have to reconnect the branch to the tree. The will of the branch to make a little leaf at the end of the branch or whatever, if we want to call that the will of the branch or the creativity of the branch, that's still the creativity of the tree. Okay, if I take my fingernail, or if I look at my fingernails and I say, okay, is that my finger creating the fingernails or my body creating the fingernails? What's the right answer?
Your body.
Well, it's my fingers too, because my fingers are my body. Like, either answer works. It's not actually an either or issue, really. I could say, well, yeah, my fingernails come out of my finger. Or I could say, oh, my fingernails are part of my body. Either one works. So if I say the tree is producing leaves, that makes sense. If I say the branch is growing leaves, that makes sense. And the reason you can overlap that is because the branch is the tree. So we're talking about inclusive categories. I'm showing with my hands now a small circle and then a bigger circle around it. That's like concentric circles. So the idea is, if I say, name a few different kinds of furniture, you can do that. Bam, bam, bam. Like, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you looking around at different kinds of furniture?
Actually, it was, yes.
Okay, what's a few kinds of furniture?
A couch, a chair.
One more.
A love seat.
Okay. So, when you said love seat, that sounds to me a lot like couch. And all of the things you picked are seating. They're types of seating. Are there any kinds of furniture that are not seating?
I'm sure.
Okay.
You have a bed.
A bed. Great. So you could sit on a bed, but it's not primarily for sitting. A desk, a dresser, a file cabinet, you could call furniture. So there's tons of things that are furnishings, right? So now I say, okay, so we've got beds, couches, love seats, and chairs. Which one of these kinds of furniture is not a kind of furniture? What? Right? It's a weird question. I saw your face, your eyebrows, right? You're like, huh? That doesn't make sense. So it's a nonsense question. So if I ask you, what kind of fingernail is not from my body, or which of my fingernails is not from my body? It's a nonsense question. If I'm talking about these fingernails on my hand, then it's a nonsense question from the beginning. It means I don't understand, or maybe I don't understand the words I'm using if I ask a question sincerely, like, which fingernails is not from my body. And then back to the analogy of a tree, if I ask which branch of this tree was not grown by the tree, it's a you could say a stupid question. Okay? Now I ask, okay, so God is the almighty, all-inclusive, all-powerful thing. When is God going to end?
Well, if he's eternal.
It's a weird question, right? If he's eternal, then how do we entertain the idea of God ending? So the eternal God, we could say, has no end, has no beginning, has no end. Another kind of popular reference that some people have heard is God is the beginning and the end, and everything in between. The Alpha and the Omega, the A and the Z. Alpha and Omega, are you familiar with those words?
Yeah.
That's just the Greek letters of the alphabet, the very first one and the very last one in the Greek alphabet. So the Alpha, or the A, and the Omega, or the last letter like Z. So it's every letter. Which letter is not invented by God? Which letter is against God's will? Which language is against God's will? These are weird questions in a way. But to ask them shows how absurd or how funny or silly that they are. And that actually can be useful, or it could be a relief, it could be interesting, whatever. So faith, I'm going to jump back to faith real quick. With faith, I'm saying anything that happens, that must be God's will. So whatever happens in the future, I'm interested. I'm not going to say I know better than God. I'm a product and process of God. I'm a creation of God. I'm made in the image of God is one of the classic ways of saying it. I think that's actually somewhat imprecise, but close enough. I'm made through the will of God, right? Everything that formed me and what I call me, that's all done by the universe. It's done by God, something like that, right?
Right.
So, which event is not God's will? Which kind of event?
Is that we consider a stupid question?
Another stupid question. I have a lot of those, so now you know a secret about me is I have a lot of stupid questions. Okay, it wasn't a secret. You already knew that. Anyway, so there's a book in the Old Testament, in the Jewish scriptures of the Judeo-Christian tradition, called Ecclesiastes. Have you heard of it?
No, never.
Okay, it means the church, or that's like a Greek word relating to the church, or the congregation, or the gathering of people, that kind of thing. That's not really important, but that's what the word means. So that's not important in the reference I'm about to make. In the book of Ecclesiastes, there is a section where they repeat these contrasts, a set of contrasts. And you might have heard these verses. You just didn't know they were from the Old Testament, maybe. Maybe you didn't even know they were from Christianity or the ancient Hebrew tradition of Judaism. There's a time for everything under heaven. A time for night and day, a time for reaping, and a time for sowing. Do you know those terms? Reaping and sowing?
Not very familiar with them.
Okay, reaping means I'm planting seeds, and then sowing... Or wait a minute, sorry. Sowing means planting seeds, and reaping is harvesting or cutting up the crops, gathering the crops. So there's a time to plant seeds, and there's a time to gather the harvest. There's a time for love, and there's a time for hate. There's a time for peace, and there's a time for war. There's a time for gathering stones, and a time for sorting out stones and discarding stones. There's all these like somewhat mundane references, So there's this long sequence of contrast. So do you understand what I mean by that? Okay. Now, did the verses that I just shared with you, did it sound familiar? Have you heard something like that before?
A little bit.
Okay. So in the late 1960s, a music group, actually, back to our favorite subject of music, a music group called the Byrds, spelled with a Y, B-Y-R-D-S. They did a song called Turn, 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 or maybe that's a subtitle, but to everything, turn, 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 there is a season, turn, 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 a day time for every Baba under heaven. I don't know all the words, actually, but you might know the melody. Do you recognize that melody?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is from the Bible, oddly enough. And every season, winter, spring, summer, fall, which they all have their appropriate time. There's a time for night, a time for day, a time for frustration, and a time for celebration, a time for mourning, and a time for birth, a time for burial, and a time for cremation, or whatever. It doesn't say all of these examples, but those are the kinds of things that are in that that chapter. I said the verse, but it's actually a whole chapter about these different contrasts. Each verse has a little, a couple of contrasts in it. So God's will is all of the different contrasts. You wouldn't say winter is the season that's against God's will. That's really weird to say that. So whatever happens, I have a mode of humility, like a child. Like when a child's first learning something, and you say, "Hey, I know that it sounds weird, but it snows in other parts of the world besides, Phoenix, Arizona. If you go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at certain times of the year, it snows. And somebody's like, snow? What's that? I've never heard of it. And I explain it. And for a little kid from Arizona, I promise you, little kids, I've actually had this, experience where a little kid discovers that there's this thing called snow, and it, they're completely astonished and intrigued because, like, what the hell, And so, this a real life occasion. This kid was about 4, and he was up in the mountains of Arizona. He had lived in the desert parts of Arizona and maybe Nevada, like by Las Vegas. I'm not sure exactly what parts of the world, of the U.S. he lived in, but he lived in the low elevation desert where it gets to 115 or 125 in the summer and doesn't get cold. It's really dry. There's hardly ever snow in Las Vegas or Phoenix. So anyway, he's up in the mountainous high level elevations, and there's all this white stuff. He wakes up one morning, and overnight it snowed. There's all this white stuff out there on the ground covering up everything, and he's never seen anything like this before. So he goes out there, and what do you think he does? He's a 4-year-old. What do you think the first thing he does?
Touch it?
He grabs it, right? And he's like playing in it and forming stuff together, and we might have encouraged him too. So he's making all this stuff, making snowballs, making snowmen. He's drawing, making little lines in the snow with his finger. So he's doing all that stuff. And about 5 or 10 minutes later, he runs inside freaking out. This was so cute, but he was totally in a panic. So, do you have an idea of what might have been going on for him?
It was cold, maybe.
He couldn't feel his hands.
Yeah.
And when he first touched the snow, he was excited. I guess he didn't notice it was cold, or he wasn't that, he was just cold and didn't care. And over the course of time, he's playing with the snow in his bare hands, and he's like, I can't feel my hands. And he, I don't remember how freaking out he was, but he was surprised. And so we, to re-stimulate the blood flow to his fingers, we like made a warm water or a bowl with warm water and had him put his hands in it or something like that. So he's totally fine. He didn't get gangrene. He wasn't like out there for 5 hours. He was out there for 5 or 10 minutes or something. And it was probably only like 29 degrees anyway. But he was totally surprised. So if I say to somebody, like a child, well, there's this thing called winter, or there's this thing called snow, or there's this thing called propaganda. Okay, if I throw out to a 4-year-old that there's something called propaganda, they're not going to be able to hardly pronounce the word. It's a freaking long word. It's like saying there's something called mononucleosis. Have you ever heard of mononucleosis? No, it's like, if you're 15 and you're healthy and you're not studying medical terminology, you're probably never going to hear of mono or mononucleosis, or maybe you will, whatever. But I could come up with some really obscure terminology, and if I throw it out to you, you wouldn't know if I was making up a word. I didn't make up mononucleosis; it's a real word. But if I made it up, you wouldn't know because you never heard it before, right? So a child is you could say ignorant, but they're humble, and by humble I mean if I say, do you know how to fly an airplane? They're not going to try and, most kids aren't going to try and trick me into thinking they know how to fly an airplane. So they're going to be humble in regard to the subject matter of flying an airplane. And if I say, okay, well, there's this one device called a tachometer. If you're flying an airplane, you need to know about the tachometer. Do you know what a tachometer is?
No.
Have you ever heard of it?
I believe so. Sounds like a term.
So they have these different little gauges or devices that measure things like your airspeed or your speed when you're flying in an airplane, or your elevation off of the ground, how high your airplane is. So there's all these different like little displays on the cockpit, right? So a kid that has never flown in an airplane or never been in a cockpit, they know that they've never been in a cockpit, and if they're not, trying to be silly or trying to cover their anxiety by pretending that they're an expert on, flying airplanes, then when you walk into a cockpit with the little kid and start saying, oh, here's the different devices, and this one is called a mononucleosis, the kid's just going to go, wow, okay, cool, mononucleosis. They're not going to know that that's not a mononucleosis, and they're not going to know. So they're innocent, they're humble, they're open. So that's the normal state. They're curious, and they learn really fast. They remember what you say, even if it is inaccurate. They might remember it. So that's the spirit of a child is important in the spirituality conversation in regard to learning and in regard to faith. I go in with, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I assume the sun's going to rise tomorrow. I assume that in the winter it's going to snow and it's going to be really cold because last time I touched snow, and every time I touched snow it was cold, so I figure, yeah, next time it's going to be cold again. So I've got all these presumptions. But if somebody says, well, here's a kind of snow that's it's not like other snow. Maybe it's a snow cone. I don't know, whatever. I'm just trying to think of when people use the word snow, maybe they're using the word to refer to something else. I just thought of a slang use of the word snow that you might not know, but it's I'll just say snow is a slang word that's used in reference to a certain kind of drug. Have you ever heard that?
I think I know what you're talking about here.
Okay, so certain movies like the Godfather movie from like early 70s, I'm pretty sure, I think they use the term snow. It's kind of out of date. I don't know that it's a modern slang. It's more of a, in the past, at a certain time, people use that word, but I'm not really that into drug culture, so I don't keep up with all the different slang words. So, anyway, so somebody says snow, and they mean snow. They're being sincere, but they don't mean the snow that I'm used to. Somebody else is an Eskimo, and if I say snow, they say, what kind of snow? Be more specific. Because they, as an Eskimo or somebody from Pittsburgh, they know a bunch of different kinds of snow. Slushy snow, I don't know. What are different kinds of snow? You could say things like snow that's safe to drive on because it's hard packed. Snow that like is good for skiing or snowboarding. Like there's a bunch of different powdery snow, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now I don't know snow that well. I expect you know it. So tell me if there's anything obvious I'm missing that you want to add. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I think pretty much covered most of.
Okay, so I covered the basic a few different kinds of snow. But somebody who's an Eskimo who walks through snow a lot, or who uses snow to build igloos or something, like what I'm talking about. They'll actually pack the snow, make it into basically bricks or whatever. So somebody who knows 10 or 20 or 30 different words for snow, if I say snow, they're going to say, what kind? Could you be more specific? Probably. Or eventually, somebody's going to say that. So now I say to a little kid, though, well, you do know that there's 3 kinds of snow that are against God's will. And I want to tell you which ones they are. You ready? And a little kid, if you tell them that, they're going to go, oh, okay. There's 3 kinds of snow that are against God's will. Should I take notes? Should I write this down? Is this on the test? Like, they don't know. So I'm saying that all kinds of snow are God's creativity, God's will, whatever. For everything, there is a season. For every season, there is a appropriate time, an appropriate function. Like during the winter, leaves fall off of the trees that are not evergreen trees. All the other trees, the leaves fall off, and the roots get deeper during the winter. I think I'm not really an expert on all that, but every season you have different things: the heat or the cool or this winter snow. All the different seasons have different things. They're just contrasts. So all the different contrasts are created by God. Or you could say the universe. Everything that we can label in language as a contrast is created by the universe or God, if we want to use those terms. If we want to use the word universe, again, like a 4-year-old probably doesn't know the word universe. So we probably say to a 4-year-old, oh, we'll just call it God. But basically, it's the same thing as far as I know. That's my perspective. So I go out with faith that's not specific or exclusive or resisting or avoiding any particular thing necessarily. I might avoid something on occasion, but I'm not trying to avoid winter necessarily. Maybe, but not because like there's something wrong with winter or whatever. Like, you know, like if I want to avoid 120 degree summers because I'm sick and I have a certain illness or something, and I think, wow, I'm going to get dehydrated and die. Well, then I promote my health, fine. But the point being, I can take my preferences and with faith look for God's will as it's showing up for me. It's not something that happened a long time ago. Creation is an ongoing process. As far as I know, there's new stuff happening today, tomorrow, next week. Creation keeps on going. It's eternal, as far as I know. So I can adopt a fundamentally open orientation, a relaxed, humble, curious orientation. What's going to happen next? I'm not certain. Here's my preferences. Here's my presumptions. I'm going to act as if my appointment for 9 o'clock is going to, actually happen. But I know it's just a presumption. I might say I'm going to talk about Santa Claus as if Santa Claus is true, but that doesn't even mean I sincerely believe it. I might talk about mononucleosis or piloting an airplane like I know what I'm talking about, but I also know I'm not an expert. So when I talk about those things, I know I'm being presumptive. So if I know I'm being presumptive, then I'm not. If somebody says, hey, you're being presumptive or you're being presumptuous, how would I respond if I know I'm being presumptive and somebody says, hey, you're being presumptive, or asks, are you being presumptive? How am I going to respond?
Probably lie about it, maybe.
What?
I don't really know.
Okay, let me give a more specific case. So I say, I presume that the airplane's going to arrive at 9 o'clock like it's scheduled to, so let's be there at 9. I presume that's what's going to happen. And so let's go ahead and leave now. And then somebody says to me, oh, you're being presumptive. How am I going to respond to their comment that I'm being presumptive?
You're not?
Well, I am being presumptive, and I'm being presumptive, like, openly. Like, what's the secret? Yeah, I'm being presumptive. Was that in question? Was that unclear? I'd be surprised that they're even bringing it up. Probably, right?
Yeah.
So, again, I told you, the weird questions, the strange things, that's part of what people do in many cases is without being attentive to what they're doing, they ask questions that aren't really logically established. The actual presumptions in their questions aren't established. That's fine. That's like guaranteed. You're going to have presumptions, and you're going to ask questions and communicate based on your presumptions. You're going to take action based on your presumptions. You're not going to get rid of having presumptions. What you can do is be open to changing your presumptions. And that requires faith in a really big sense. Like, God's will is perfect. That's maybe a weird word to throw in here, but I'm going to toss it in. If God's will is perfect, if God's really wise, or if the universe is really wise, then I'm going to just be open to, okay, what are my presumptions and can I improve them? I'm not going to be like, what are my presumptions and can I defend them and get other people to agree with me? That's not important to somebody with that kind of faith. They're just going to want to discover. They're going to have the humility or openness of a child. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's that generic, I'm open. Let me just ask really quick. We don't need to get into length about this because I want to come back to another maybe quick thing about what I mean by the supreme faith. Well, actually, this is related to it. So if somebody says, I have faith that the airplane will come at 9 p.m., and then you say, well, I'm not sure about that. And they say, no, I am sure. What other words could we use to label that mode besides, they use the word faith. What other words could we use?
What other words could we use?
Well, presumptuous actually comes to mind for me because there's a lot of words we could use. Argumentative is one of the ones. So if they say, no, I'm sure the plane will come at 9. And it's like, how do you know? Why are you arguing about it? Like, that's weird. At some point, that just seems really weird that somebody would be like pounding their fist or raising their voice saying, no, the plane will come at 9. Well, how do you know? Yeah, we presume the plane will come at 9, but that doesn't mean it must come at 9 or it is going to come at 9 for sure. If people are anxious and they say, well, the plane must come at 9, it will come at 9, I know it's going to come at 9, stop saying that it might not, then they're anxious, right? They're afraid. And if they call that faith, that's definitely not the same thing I was talking about, right? If they say, I have faith, no, I have faith that the plane will come at 9. They're actually not, they're probably not even really confident that it will happen. They're probably scared that it won't happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? So other people will use the term faith in regard to religious institutions and religious principles and so on. I'm asserting that if somebody really is clear and relaxed and understands a principle, like the way I'm using God's will, they go, yeah, well, we can take God's will as if it means blah, blah, blah. We can presume that it means everything that happens, and then if we take that presumption and then we carry it forward, then we, with the faith or the relaxed presumption with that particular interpretation, then we can go forward and just see if that's a good interpretation, see if it works, if it's useful, if it's appealing, whatever. So faith in that case means I know I'm presuming something, I'm open to God's will, I'm not rigid about my presumption, I know it's a presumption, and I presume that if somebody else says God's will, that they mean it the way I mean it. But I'm also aware that when they say God's will, they might not mean what I mean. If they say the word faith, they might not mean what I mean. If they say the word snow, they might not mean exactly what I think they mean when they say snow. It's just words. So, any question or comment?
No.
Okay. So, now the other thing about faith is people talk about faith as some people talk about faith as a evidence or an effect or result of something else. When I say that, I'm asking, again, kind of a backwards question, but anything come to mind? What produces faith? Any guess what I'm thinking of?
What produces faith? Like,
yeah.
Where does it come from?
Okay, yeah. The kind of faith I've been talking about, what produces that?
It's not really simple, but I just don't sound like.
It's just a word that you've heard before. It's not a big point. So, have you ever heard somebody say that if you have faith, then you can get the result of something? No?
Once you say it, I'm going to know what it is, though.
Okay. Well, I just asked two different questions that are kind of contrasting questions. What produces faith, and then what does faith produce? Okay, so I'm asking not what your thought is. If you think of something like that you just create and, conceive right now, that's cool. I'm mostly asking, does it remind you of anything you've already heard? What does faith produce? What does faith give you access to? If you have faith, how most people use the word, then what does that give you access to? Anything come to mind?
Heaven.
Heaven. Great answer. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay. So now flipping back to the way I've been using the word faith, this relaxed kind of faith and all that. If someone has that outcome of faith, or that result of that, what I'm calling the supreme faith, if somebody has that outcome or that effect or that experience, what produces it? What causes it? You have an idea of a word that we would put blank causes the supreme faith?
No.
Okay, cool. That's no problem. So, faith gets you into heaven is something that people, say sometimes. And some of what they might mean by that would be my interpretation is if someone prays or relaxes or just allows, heaven to come to them, you might say, that's important in terms of getting to heaven, whatever that means. It could be important to actually be alert maybe, but not be like agonizing about how do I get to heaven. You don't get to heaven by agonizing about it. Have a little faith, relax a little bit. Heaven will come to you. You'll get to it, or you won't. But agonizing about it won't make it come any faster. Worrying about it won't make it come any faster. If you worry about how many hairs are on your head or what you're going to eat tomorrow, that's not going to get you closer to heaven. You can count the hairs on your head if you really want, but it has nothing to do with getting to heaven. Worrying about, oh my gosh, my hairline's receding, does that get somebody closer to heaven? No. Agonizing in general, worrying in general, that causes people distress. It's not what we associate with heaven. We associate heaven with joy and relaxation, serenity, gratitude, things like that, right? So, can I agonize my way into gratitude or into joy? It doesn't necessarily work that way. It might be a bad approach. If I'm trying to, worry my way into heaven, it might be better to have a little faith. So people say things like that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And there's been a controversy in the Christian tradition, in the New Testament, even in the books of the New Testament. People talk about, is faith, well, they're using the English word faith, but this is, before the English language was even created. I don't know if you know that, doesn't matter. So somebody translated this word faith, and they said something like, is faith required to get to heaven? Or is faith required to be saved? Or is faith required for salvation? And some people said, faith is all that's required, good works are not required. Meaning, like good deeds. So there's all sorts of ways that people have talked about what faith could produce. Or there's at least a few ways. Are you with me still?
Yeah.
Okay. So faith, in that sense, is the access or catalyst for salvation. It's the cause of salvation. And in that sense of the word faith, it works fine. I totally agree in that sense. That relative relaxation, that being open to God's will, having faith in God to bring it to you, God to show you the way, all that kind of stuff. I agree with that. There's also a way of using the word faith, like I've been using, where we talk about faith as the effect of salvation, or the signal, or the indicator of salvation. In the religious metaphor, a lot of times people will say the fruit. So you will know them by their fruit. You'll be able to tell somebody who's saved and somebody who's unsaved from their fruit. Have you ever heard that idea before?
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the different fruits? Or what are some of the different signals that you may have heard, or that even you can invent, but if you've heard them before, repeat what you've heard? What would be a fruit that someone would have that would be an indicator of them being saved, or them being redeemed, or in heaven? I don't know if in heaven is how people usually say it, but those kind of things.
I mean, I've heard the word fruit, but I don't know exactly
Okay.
how to describe it.
Okay. So what would be the fruit or evidence of somebody who's the child of the devil and the deluded in sin and not saved, whatever that means? What do you imagine could be some of the indicators of that?
The way they act.
The way they act, okay, but I'm asking for a little more, precision.
Specific.
What kind of ways would somebody act that's not saved compared to somebody who is saved? I know this is a little bit of a weird thing to talk about maybe, but I'm getting back to this issue of contrast, and there's somewhere I'm going with it. So play along with me if you would.
Right.
Some different kinds of actions, or different patterns of actions, and which ones are indicators of salvation, which ones are indicator of not being saved, at least not yet. What do you have to say?
Someone who's on the same indicator. I wish I knew what I could say.
What?
I wish I knew what I could say here.
Okay, so you have an experience now of like curiosity and openness, and I could say humility. Does that work? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That is one of the indicators. Be ye like a little child, and that's how you're going to actually. That's actually stated more as a pathway, or how you get to be saved. Is you've got to be like a little child in the sense of being open and humble. But it's also an indicator. You don't lose openness after salvation by any reference that I ever recall hearing, and how I think of it. You don't lose openness or lose modesty. It's related to the word humility when I say modesty. You still can adopt humility anytime. If somebody talks about, piloting airplanes or medical stuff, and I'm someone who has the supreme faith and is in the mode of salvation, then I'm gonna be like okay with understanding whatever presumptions they have. I'm not going to be resistant. I'm not going to be antagonistic. I'm not going to be argumentative. I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not going to ridicule them. I'm not going to make fun of them. Probably. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the fruits of salvation, or could be called faith, like that really relaxed mode. Once somebody really understands and experiences salvation, whatever that means, once somebody understands and experiences it, then they're going to have a general tendency towards being calm, towards being curious, towards being open, optimistic maybe, but I don't mean like, I just mean like a general sense of respect for whatever is happening and other people. I don't need anybody to agree with me. I don't need any particular validation from somebody. Why? Because I've got faith, like a kind of confidence. If other people's don't agree or they don't understand, that's understandable, right? Some people may, you take a 3-year-old and I try and talk to them about mononucleosis and they don't understand, and I think that's because I'm talking to a 3-year-old. I should, stop talking to a 3-year-old about that subject. It's dumb of me. Or it's naive. Naivety could be a sign of somebody who isn't mature spiritually or who isn't experiencing salvation. You know what I mean by naivety, right?
Naive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another word, yeah.
Okay. So, if somebody's argumentative, is that more a sign of being saved or a sign of being unsaved?
Unsaved.
Okay? So I'm just picking the term save and unsaved. These, I tell you for real, I don't use this terminology very much. It's not that big a deal to me. It is convenient though. In talking to you, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say saved and unsaved. So if somebody is, so what do I say, antagonistic, that's unsaved. If somebody is grateful, what do you associate that with? Saved or unsaved?
Saved.
Okay.
You would say.
Okay. Somebody with a sense of humor.
Well.
Huh?
I could really go either way, couldn't it?
Okay. Somebody who's really irritable.
I'd probably go more towards unsaved.
Okay. So, antagonistic, irritable. I was thinking of sense of humor as in the direction of saved. It may, it depends on, if somebody's really tense, I would think, or anxious, I would think that's unsaved. If they're relatively relaxed, I don't mean they're like completely numb or something, but they're alert but generally relaxed, I think of that as favorable. Whether we call it saved or not, it's favorable. I know I like that idea for myself. If I have a moment that's not, grateful, most of the time I would rather be grateful than anything other than grateful. If I have respect for other people, I generally prefer that over any experience where I didn't have respect for somebody or didn't have respect for myself. I generally prefer respect over whatever the alternatives are. So, argumentativeness, do you know the word antagonism?
It's like to keep picking at something, right?
Yep. So I think of that, defensiveness, insecurity, to ridicule other people. Is that a sign of confidence and faith and salvation, or is that a sign of what is that a sign of? to ridicule other people, what's that a sign of?
Unsaved.
Okay, you could say unsaved. I mean, I was getting away from the word unsaved and saved a little bit, but what else? What else would you call it if somebody has a tendency to ridicule people? What else would you? What other labels could you give for their mode of operation?
Ignorance.
Ignorance? Say more.
Say more.
Say more about that. I can elaborate on the subject if you want, but
yeah.
You want me to say more about the ignorance thing?
Yeah.
Okay, check this out. So I say to you, hey, do you know what mononucleosis is? And you say,
no.
Because you're what?
ignorant of the subject.
You're ignorant of the subject. So ignorance of the subject is not automatically something that produces a tendency to ridicule others. So that's really clear, right? Ignorance just means I recognize that I don't know. The odd thing about the tendency to ridicule is I say to you, no, I know snow better than you. There's no powder snow. There's no such thing as powder snow. That's not true. You're an idiot. You're retarded if you think that. If I start getting into ridicule and attack and just kind of like ridiculous arguments where I'm just basically invalidating what you said, I'm not giving any evidence, I'm not asking any questions, I'm just like arguing, I'm just ridiculing. How is that related to ignorance? Go ahead. Now let's hear what you have to say.
Well, they're kind of like ignorant of what they're doing. That makes sense. Like, not what they're doing, but what... Wait a second. I know what I want to say.
You said it pretty well, oddly enough. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of background. So they're not ignorant of... It's different from being ignorant of the subject matter. If I'm telling you, no, there's no such thing as powder snow, and there is, then I'm inaccurate. So that, unless I'm joking, that's ignorant in that sense, right? I don't really know powdered snow. If I'm saying, oh, there's no such thing and it's impossible, and you must be, are you an American? Because only Americans would be stupid enough to blah, blah, right? I start putting you into some category. Are you a Democrat? Because only Democrats would be. Are you a Christian? Because only Christians would be. I start getting in that combative mode. So that is a sign of a kind of ignorance. But it's not just a humble, like, kids' open curiosity ignorance, a plain, relaxed ignorance. It's actually a tense ignorance with the added element of, I don't know what I'm doing. Not only do I not know what I'm talking about, but I don't know that I'm being a dick. If if you're okay with that terminology, I know that's weird, but if I'm being a jerk about it, and I'm saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You must be a blah blah blah. If you think that da da da, and I get into all that ridicule mode, that's being a jerk. You might say that's being a jerk, right? So is being a jerk or throwing a tantrum, are those things we associate with people who are spiritually mature? No. People who are spiritually mature might joke about those things, and they might occasionally experience them, but they probably are less likely to be ridiculing other people than somebody who's less spiritually mature. We might say unsaved. Again, I'm not really that focused on the word saved or whatever, but the idea, as far as supreme faith, to connect the dots here, is that faith, or that big, big, wide openness, is a result of spiritual maturity. And I've been using the term salvation occasionally, and I'm going to just say that the word salvation could be a word that we mean that. When we use the word salvation, we could mean somebody who's mentally healthy, who's spiritually mature, who's intellectually mature. There's a variety of words that we could use, a variety of ways that we could use the word salvation. I doubt that you would know the origin of the word salvation, but if you look at the first 4 letters of the word, does it remind you of anything else?
Should it?
Should it? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you take SALV and then add the word E, or add the letter E, are you familiar with that word? Salve? Salve?
Oh, no.
Okay, you don't know that one. How about, salvage is another word you probably have heard it has that same root or same beginning in this case. So salve refers to like a soft, moisturized, how do I want to say this? It's a goopy, liquidy, but somewhat maybe a little bit of gelatinous, creaminess to it. It's a thing that you could put on your skin, and it's associated with health. And the word salvation and the word salve are related to the word salutation, salad, and holistic, oddly enough, and health, healing, holy. This is trivia in a sense, but holy and whole, like W-H-O-L-E, and holy, they're all related to the word salvation and holiness. So we can say that the holiness or the salvation or the spiritual maturity of an individual can be indicated by how little they ridicule and how often they something else. What's something that you would say is a sign of spiritual maturity or holiness? Anything come to mind?
Relaxed.
Okay. Relaxed. It's so many things, right? So if they're relatively relaxed, if they have the ability to take other people from a state of distress or panic to being relaxed or calm, that's another thing. We would probably think, well, that's healthy, or that's saintly, that's spiritually mature. Okay? So the ability to share relaxation with somebody else, that could be an indicator. Anything else?
I'll think of something.
Okay, I've got one that I bet you're going to know. Okay, so if somebody has a lot of resentment, is that, and has trouble like dealing with resentment, like they really honestly, are just challenged by resentment, is that a sign of spiritual immaturity or spiritual maturity? If they have trouble with resentment.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
What does resentment mean?
Oh, well, that's a good question in this case. I resent things that I wish were not true. That's the definition I'm going to give. So something that I really wish wasn't true. It's really simple. There's other ways I could say it that are more elaborate, but something I wish that wasn't true. And the twist with resentment is a lot of times it's not just resentment about something. It's not like people don't resent that it snows. They resent that the weatherman said there was only a 10% chance of precipitation and it snowed. Then they resent the weatherman because the weatherman was wrong and they trusted the weatherman and the weatherman betrayed them and all this, personal kind of issue. So resentment is not towards the snow. It's not towards the winter or towards the temperature or towards the climate or towards the cloud. The resentment is typically, I wish that other person wasn't the way they were. I wish things weren't the way they were. I wish my life wasn't the way it was. I wish God hadn't done it this way. But here it is, and I don't like it, and who can I blame? And resentment is starting to get into the realm of blame. So I resent the weatherman for deceiving me or for neglecting their duties. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So somebody who has a lot of resentment and is really challenged with dealing with resentment, do we see that as a sign of spiritual maturity or immaturity?
Immaturity.
Okay. So somebody who's quick to forgive in the sense of I've forgot about it. It's nothing. It's okay. It's fine. That's what happened. I forgive you. You don't need to make up for it. Everything's all right. That kind of forgiveness. Okay. What does that indicate?
Spiritual maturity.
Okay. So you could say they're good at forgiving, or they're good at letting go of resentment, or even not even having resentment. They're good at just going with the flow of things and not even having resentment come up as often or as intensely as we would expect it. Like, humans are going to have resentments. They're going to have fear. They're going to have confusion. Like, that's normal in the learning process. You encounter something unfamiliar, and at some point you're going to be, you're going to be curious, and then you're going to be confused, and then you're going to be clear, and that's how it works. All right, so to me, that's like not just a summary, but we've really covered a lot of the stuff that I covered probably in that Supreme Faith piece, and maybe a couple other new things threw in there. So as far as the bigger subject of religion and spirituality, do you want to make a comment on what we've covered so far? Do you want to redirect a little bit right now? Or do you want to kind of wrap things up for now, and we can continue at another time if you'd like, but, we'll stop soon.
Second thing you said.
Which was that?
Wrap it up and we can
Okay.
continue this.
Okay.
Whenever you can.
Okay, so anything before we conclude then? Any question, any comment, anything else you want to cover?
I want to ask one thing.
Yeah.
It might not be about this particular subject.
Yeah, anything, whatever. That's what I'm saying. Like, we'll, go for it, and
Well, I want to learn,
let's see.
not learn, but Ed always says that you and him are, good with, not good with, but, understand language and such.
Yep.
I don't know what he means by that. What? I don't know what he means by that, but you can take it further.
Okay, well, I encourage you to ask him. I certainly can give my answer, but I mean, one of the things is you can ask him what he means, and he'll probably give you an answer similar to what I would tell you. I'm almost sure he would. What we've been talking about already has a lot to do with it. We're aware of these different contrasts, like hot or cold, good or bad, right or wrong, hate, love, summer, winter. Those are all contrasts. So we're aware of contrasts, and we're open to all of them, or to the extent that we're open to all of them, that's related to being good with language. It's like it allows us to learn more quickly. We're more sensitive to our experience. If we are resisting certain patterns as too disturbing, then that takes stress, or that takes attention, energy, chronic tension. If I'm always going around avoiding something, always totally avoiding it, that's stressful. It's a state of already being in tension. In contrast, if I'm generally relaxed and generally open, then I'm sensitive. I'm not resisting anything. I'm not trying to, in a particular moment at least, I'm not trying to defend my point of view or defend my past actions. I'm just, exploring. I'm experimenting. And if you want to get good at language, explore it. It's simple as that. You read books, you talk to people, you listen, in movies or whatever. If you want to get good at piloting, or if you want to get good at basketball, you got to do it. You got to get out there and get in a plane and pilot, or you got to get a basketball and a hoop, and you got to practice. So if you want to get good at language or understanding language, it takes time. Just learning how to speak English, or learning the word resentment or whatever. You just you explore it. And one of the cool things about exploring it is you're not doing it in an assigned way. You're doing it because you're interested, and you can do it in a way that's fun for you. And if you liked our interaction in this dialogue, if you enjoyed it, or it worked well for you, then you can do that more. But you don't have to. You could, if you find something else 5 times as good, great. And maybe in 2 years you want to do something that you've only done once or twice, but now you want to explore it again, or that method. That's fine too. So it's a pretty distinct thing to explore something from relaxation and curiosity, and it's actually a luxury. It's like a lot of people do not have nearly the prosperity and lifestyle that you have or that I've had and that I have now. A lot of people don't have it in the world today. A lot of people do in Pennsylvania and Arizona. We're in the U.S., so we're in, like, you know, one of the richest places you could be on the whole. But 300 years ago, I don't know if people explored language like you and I can do. I was actually talking about Facebook with your dad the other day, and social media and computers and all that. Like Google, the search engine, people have access to stuff so quickly, and they can, if they want to study a certain subject, or if they want to watch people interacting and study social interaction, go on Facebook for a while and find a long thread on some group, and you can study how people interact. You know, it could be a group of people, 2 people, whatever. There's a lot of opportunities because there's all these recording devices, there's cameras, there's, you know, cameras for photographs, and then there's video webcams. If you want to study stuff, you want to study the Hubble telescope. Have you ever heard of the Hubble telescope? It's a telescope that's in outer space, or maybe not outer space, but it's outside of the immediate area of the Earth. It's, you know, we created this thing, some people did, sent it up there and shooted it out towards the planets, or, you know, I don't remember where it is, but it's going out slowly, moving past the different planets as it, you know, goes in its trajectory or its direction. And as it's out there, it's got really powerful visual, video, whatever, photograph. I don't know what this stuff's called, but it can take pictures, and they're digital pictures, you know. And then it takes the little, you know, prints out, develops the photo, sends it back to the Earth, because there's this little clothesline, and it clips it on the clothesline with the what's that called? You know, the thing, the clothespin. And then they just pull it with their arms over and over, and they pull in the photographs from the Hubble Space Telescope, and then they can see these pictures. And the other funny thing is that they use digital radio transmissions instead of clotheslines, because the clotheslines, it's like it rains and it ruins the photograph, so they stopped using the clothesline, and now they just send it through radio signals, and it's really great, like satellite, you know, like cell phones, all that stuff. So there's advanced technology. So did you catch? I assume that you caught my joke, right? No? You didn't catch my joke. You're tired.
About the clothesline and stuff.
The clothesline, yeah.
Yeah, that sounded...
It was stupid. But anyway, I was having fun with it. So I threw in a little silly thing. But with regard to, like, technology, with Facebook, with electricity, with, you know, all this stuff, you've got access to studying language or anything else you want to study. Like, you know, you can do like those pilot training, you know, software and pilot training simulators, and you can do one on your computer. Like, you could download a free one and be doing it in 30 seconds. Like 20, 30 years ago, they were, you know, things you had to buy, but nowadays there's tons of them all over the place. And then, you know, if you go to, like, lots of places have training simulators where you get into a real cockpit, basically, and then it does things, and it shakes, and it, like, really, you know, makes your body like you're flying. And if you do a thing where you fly, and you can do one on your computer, like, you could download a free one and be doing it in 30 seconds. Like 20, 30 years ago, they were, you know, things you had to buy, but nowadays there's tons of them all over the place. And then, you know, if you go to, like, lots of places have training simulators where you get into a real cockpit, basically, and then it does things, and it shakes, and it, like, really, you know, makes your body like you're flying. And if you do a thing where you fly upside down or something, I don't know what it does, but it simulates the actual physical experience. That's the next thing, not just the visual and everything. So flight simulators, all sorts of simulations are getting really advanced and powerful, so we can learn stuff really quickly with the help of technology. And as far as specifically language and communication, if you have fun with it and put some time into it, you will get much better than you are now at communicating, and much better at being precise with language. You'll be able to also, if you talk to people and listen to them, you'll be really good at kind of understanding other people, when they're communicating more quickly. And if you don't understand them, you'll know it. You'll know how to create an opportunity for them to explain themselves better to you so that you can understand them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, your dad and I and another a lady did a call right before our call. That's why I delayed our call. And it had some really interesting things in it. And a lot of what we were talking about would be emotions and then communication. So we added, like we did in this call, we were talking about antagonism and tantrums, and I don't know which words we used, but we talked about some, resentment is an emotional state. Blame is a kind of emotion. Contempt. So we talked about emotion like that. We also talked about emotion a little bit like gratitude. So when we can communicate about anything really well, that's really useful. When we can communicate about emotions really well, that's really important in relationships. Like a man and a woman, for instance, or in a family, like parents to children, that kind of thing. Emotions can be really important. And a lot of people, especially men, are not very good at communicating emotions. And so that's something that a lot of men, might get interested in at some point. And if not, that's fine too. There's a lot of things you can learn about. There's a lot of things you can communicate about. I consider the exploration of language to be the purpose of spirituality. So spirituality to me is all about being mindful or attentive to language, and then also experimenting and getting, effective at using language, effective at listening to other people and really getting what they're experiencing, learning quickly from other people or otherwise. So, spiritual maturity to me should, if you're using my definition of spirituality as the study of language and the exploration and really appreciation for language, then if someone's spiritually mature, then they should be very flexible and good at communicating. Whether that means writing or comprehension of reading something, or real-time, like stressful communication, like I'm the pilot and I'm talking to the air traffic controller and there's an issue and the plane's supposed to be in at 9 p.m. but we're going to have to be late because there's a storm and the snow, and it's this kind of snow. It's not just any kind of snow, it's a certain kind of snow. And so we've got to deal with the stress of all that. People who are really mature, we can call it spiritual maturity, but we don't have to call it spiritual maturity. But people who are really mature and really good at communicating, those are the people that we want to be air traffic controllers and pilots. We want them to be good at piloting as far as actually landing the plane and stuff, but we also want them to be really good at communicating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm just using a convenient example of pilot, but everything in life that involves other people has the opportunity for communication and the opportunity for us to use language. And if you ever go to a foreign country where nobody speaks English, you will notice how big a difference it is from when you can talk to people. Even if you don't say a lot to them, the fact that you can, and you're able to, and they can communicate to you, it's a really big difference socially to be able to talk to people and have them understand you and so on. So that's something I'm really interested in, is even getting further developed in regard to skills at communicating, and that's why I'm so interested in talking with people and sharing, and if I can answer questions that you're curious about, and we both have fun, then that's something I'm willing to make a priority, at least occasionally. All right?
All right.
So, what do you think about asking your dad what his answer would be?
Probably pretty similar to yours.
Okay. What do you
So I
think
think
about like you bringing up to him though? Are you thinking you want to do that soon, or it's
Yeah.
like kind of covered and you got it and you don't need to ask? You want to ask
Well,
him?
I'd be curious what he would say. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You're curious. So I'd be curious what he would say too. And I encourage you to do it. Like I think it's a good idea. I mean, it'll give him an opportunity to say whatever he has to say about it that will be, not only educational for him to just be confronted by your question, but because you're his son, you two can actually have a different kind of dialogue than you and I would have. It's not. I don't want to say it's better or worse. It's natural that it could be different, and that's pretty cool. All right. Well, I'm about ready to conclude, but I do again want to give you the opportunity to say anything you want to throw in, or any other questions that are burning you want to throw them in right now. Let me know. Anything?
I'm good.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed talking with you, and did you want to kind of just check back with me, sometime soon about talking more, or do you want to plan something?
I would like to Skype again sometime.
Do you want to plan it later?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can get back to me, and if I haven't heard from you in a week, I'm just making this up. You can tell me if you want me to do something different. If I haven't heard from you in a week, I'll send you like a private message, okay?
Okay. I'll get back to you by then.
What's that?
I'll get back to you before then.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.